We only keep her around because it makes us look good in the fundraiser pictures." A bubble of laughter followed. "Darling, please," Celeste's voice curled through the air, light and sharp like glass cracking. "Otherwise, she's just dead weight. I mean, come on. The smell of that lavender perfume? I swear it lingers in the curtains like old grief. Smells like a retirement ward," she added, wrinkling her nose, then laughing again. The words sliced through the air of the glass-walled penthouse in the Seaport district like a sudden cold wind. Eleanor stood just beyond the hallway arch, her feet planted on the pristine marble floor, a silver tray of homemade bruschetta trembling in her hands. She didn't breathe, couldn't. The jazz music, soft and elegant in the background, now felt absurd, like it was mocking her. The voices from the kitchen were too clear to be misheard. Celeste, her daughter-in-law, the woman Eleanor had once held in her arms through 3 tearful false pregnancy alarms. The woman for whom she had emptied part of her retirement to buy a vintage Belgian lace veil because it had to look timeless. Eleanor's lips trembled. She looked down at the tray. The toasted baguette slices were crisp just enough, the diced tomatoes still glistening from olive oil, seasoned gently with basil she had grown herself, on the tiny windowsill of her Dorchester kitchen. She'd spent her entire afternoon preparing it. She waited, her heart thudded like a fist against her ribs. Waited for Julian's voice, her son, her only son. She waited for him to speak, to defend her, to say something, anything, that would slice through his wife's cruelty like a blade of light. "She's not dead weight," she imagined him saying. "That woman is the reason I have everything." But all she heard was the soft clink of ice in crystal. And then, his voice. "Julian." "Yeah," he said, low and casual. "I know." A chuckle, light as fog. "Let's just bear it for a few more hours. Once the investors leave, we'll send her off. She's good for the backstory, you know? The noble widow. The sacrifices. Blah, blah. People eat that stuff up. But God, it's exhausting. She has no clue how the real world works." The tray didn't fall. Eleanor didn't cry out. She didn't drop to the floor or run screaming through the penthouse. Instead, an icy stillness unfurled through her. A strange calm, like the moment a fever breaks, when the sweat dries and you're left weak, but very clear. She turned silently. Her hands no longer trembled. She walked back into the main dining area and set the tray down with surgical precision, her fingers smoothing over the navy chiffon dress she'd bought just for tonight. Julian had said it was an important night for his architecture firm. He had told her, almost absently, "Try to look put together, okay, Mom? It's a high-end crowd. Put together. Presentable." Eleanor smoothed the sleeves, lifted her chin. Then, she walked, not rushed, to the hall closet, took her beige trench coat off the hanger, and slipped it over her shoulders. No one noticed her as she moved to the side door. No one looked up as the service entrance clicked shut behind her. Not one face turned from the laughter, from the clinking of glass, from the smell of cologne and money and betrayal. Outside, the air was sharp with salt and early spring chill. She inhaled it deeply, slowly. Someone, had died in that hallway. And it wasn't Eleanor Whitmore. It was the version of her who swallowed slights with a smile. The one who wore perfume to feel closer to a husband lost 20 years ago. The one who traded dignity for proximity. The version who gave without memory and loved without conditions. That woman was gone. Eleanor walked into the night, her heels clicking against the stone, as Boston gleamed behind her like a stranger. 2 weeks passed in silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that hums just before a storm crashes down. The kind where every second breath feels like a question you're too afraid to ask. Eleanor had returned to her quiet triple-decker home in Dorchester, the one with creaky floorboards and fading family pictures, where time had folded neatly into routine. A cup of tea at dawn, crossword puzzles in the afternoon, and classical music humming softly through the walls. For a while, she tried to fall back into that rhythm. But silence doesn't forget. The first text came on a Tuesday morning, barely past 7. Julian's name lit up her phone, followed by a string of question marks and panicked bursts of digital confusion. "Mom, why was my black card declined at lunch? Are you okay? What's going on?" Then came the coldly professional email from the bank. The joint investment account had been closed. Account number 4479. The one she had quietly, faithfully deposited into every month for over 15 years. Gone. Next, a heavy envelope with the weight of finality landed in Julian and Celeste's penthouse mailbox. A certified notice from the mortgage lender. Legal, severe, unforgiving. The illusion cracked. The perfect skyline life began to rot from the inside out. But to understand the downfall, you had to understand the beginning. Eleanor Whitmore, 68 years old, retired head librarian, a woman who had spent 4 decades among the quiet, honest order of books and the solemn comfort of old paper. A widow for 20 years, ever since Richard, her husband, her lighthouse, lost his fight to pancreatic cancer and left her to raise their son alone. Julian had only been 12 when she buried his father. A boy with 2 thin arms and eyes too big with grief. Eleanor had looked into those eyes and made a vow no one else heard. He would not suffer. She worked morning shifts at the library, then typed medical records at night until her knuckles locked. She skipped meals so he could eat steak once a week. She wore shoes stuffed with cardboard in the winter so he could wear Nikes to school and not feel the sting of poverty. He drew buildings on the back of her reports, always with her name scrawled at the top floor. "I'll build this one day," he said once, hair flopping into his eyes. "Mom, you'll live in the penthouse. You'll be a queen." She had laughed, breath catching in her throat. "I'd like that, Jules." She believed him, because mothers need to. He went on to graduate from Harvard, top of his class. That victory had come at the cost of Eleanor's life insurance policy and a second mortgage on her home. He became the shining man she always hoped he'd be. Sharp suits, sharp smile, the kind of man who turned heads and shook hands with confidence. Then Celeste Monroe happened, a PR specialist with a spine of steel and a soul lined with ice. Beautiful, elegant, and polished to perfection. She treated life like a brand to be curated. She once told Eleanor that authenticity was luxury for people who didn't care about success. From the first day they met, Eleanor felt it, the chill behind her smiles, the delicate digs dressed as jokes. "Oh, Eleanor, that's such a sweet story," Celeste would say, glancing at her phone mid-sentence. "You should write a memoir. Call it Life Before Wi-Fi." Julian began changing, slowly, like water wearing down stone. He stopped coming by, stopped calling. Her Sunday pot roast dinners became awkward brunches filled with half-hearted compliments and forced laughter. He started saying things like, "Mom, you wouldn't get it. Things are different now." Still, she helped them. When they wanted the penthouse with the floor-to-ceiling windows and zero financial footing, Julian came to her. He wept, held her hands across her kitchen table, the one where he'd once colored construction paper towers. "Mom, I just need a guarantor. It's just a technicality. My capital's locked in development deals. You won't be on the hook, it's all secure. I build things that last, remember?" Eleanor had looked into her son's pleading eyes. The same eyes that once feared thunderstorms and monsters under the bed. And she signed. 6 months later, he asked for a joint account. "For emergencies," he said. "You add some, I add some." Smart planning. She began depositing $2,000 a month. Pension, Social Security, whatever was left after essentials. She never checked the statements. She trusted him. That trust shattered the night she walked out of the penthouse and drove back through the rain-slick streets of Boston. She didn't go to bed. She entered her study, turned on the old desk lamp, and opened a drawer she hadn't touched in a year. Inside was a simple box. A black file box full of unopened statements, contracts, bank correspondence, the paper trail of her own exploitation. Eleanor poured herself bitter black coffee, slipped on her glasses, and began reading. Line by line, statement by statement, the horror arrived in quiet, rising waves. Her money was gone. Not used for emergencies or investments, but for luxuries. Spa days, handbags worth thousands, car leases on imported vehicles, dinners at places where a salad cost more than her week's groceries. They were living like royalty. On her pension, her vision blurred, but she didn't stop. Then came the mortgage papers. Thick with legalese. She read slowly, carefully, like she was shelving books again. That's when she found it. Page 42. A clause. Small, dense text. An acceleration clause tied to the guarantor's financial safety. A trapdoor Celeste and Julian had clearly never seen. But Eleanor did. If the cosigner, that was her, believed their financial stability was being compromised, or that there had been misuse of collateral or a breach of trust, they could demand immediate loan repayment. If not repaid, the asset could be liquidated. Foreclosure. She sat frozen until dawn, pages sprawled around her like wreckage. The coffee was cold, the sun was rising, and she could feel something inside her shift, grief turning to steel. She heard her mother's voice, Rose, a seamstress who had raised 3 girls alone during the Depression. You can give someone the shirt off your back, Eleanor, she used to say. But don't you ever let them skin you alive. They had skinned her alive. But the flaying ended now. At 9 a.m., she called Harold Bellamy, an old friend, an estate attorney, a shark in tweed with a soft spot for Dickens and a stronger one for justice. Harold, she said, her voice raw. I need an appointment. Today. I've been robbed by my own son. He cleared his schedule. At noon, Eleanor walked into his office with a canvas bag full of documents, handwritten notes, and printed transcripts of the insults she overheard. Harold listened. He didn't interrupt, just scribbled furiously on his yellow legal pad. When she finished, the silence settled. He cleaned his glasses, slowly. What you've just described, he said finally, voice low and lethal, is theft by deception. Financial abuse. While criminal prosecution is difficult since he's legally attached to those accounts, the mortgage is your hammer. That clause on page 42? That's our nuke. He leaned back. If we move now, the bank can recall the loan. They'll have 30 days to repay or forfeit the property. Do it, Eleanor said. What about the cards? Harold asked, raising a brow. Cancel them, she snapped. Mark them stolen, if you have to. He hesitated, studying her. This is the point of no return, Eleanor. Once this starts, their lives unravel. Credit, reputation, everything. Eleanor looked out the window, at people bustling along the city sidewalk below, rushing to meetings and errands, unaware of the war about to begin upstairs. I heard my son laugh, she whispered. He laughed when his wife called me dead weight. Do it, Harold. I'm not destroying the relationship. They did that. I'm just signing the death certificate. And so it began. By sunset, Eleanor had withdrawn the last $400 from the joint account, all that remained of the tens of thousands she'd sacrificed. The credit cards? Cancelled. The account? Closed. And Harold sent the letter to the mortgage lender, invoking the clause with formal precision. Then came silence. 3 days of it. She spent them scrubbing her house clean, hands red from bleach, shelves dusted within an inch of their lives. Her kitchen glowed. Her books were reorganized. She kept moving, because if she stopped, her mind would scream. Then, Friday evening, the storm finally arrived. Julian called. Again and again and again. She let the phone ring. Let it vibrate across the table like a warning. The texts came next. Mom? What the hell? The bank just called. Are you serious? They're recalling the mortgage. $2.5 million. They said you did this? She sat on the couch, sipping chamomile tea. Calm, unmoving. The phone buzzed like a dying insect. Finally, on the 20th call, she picked up. Hello, Julian. His voice exploded, raw and frantic. Are you out of your mind? What did you do? The bank wants full payment. They're threatening foreclosure. Jesus, Mom. Are you trying to ruin us? Eleanor took another sip of tea, the warmth soothing her throat. I protected myself, Julian, she said. You're destroying our lives. I'm preserving mine. You're making us look like fools. We have events next week, we have investors. Then you should have thought about that, she said, voice soft but unshaking, before you laughed at your mother behind her back and called her dead weight. The silence on the other end was louder than his shouting. You heard that? His voice had cracked now. Small, ashen. I heard everything. I heard Celeste say I smelled like a nursing home. I heard you agree. I heard you plan my Uber ride like I was an unwanted guest. Mom, no, listen, it was just stress. We were joking, it was nothing. No, Julian, she interrupted, the old librarian in her voice now. The voice that once shushed rooms into silence. It was everything. Julian's voice cracked over the line, desperate now, the smoothness long gone. You don't understand, Mom. If the bank freezes our assets, it's over. The penthouse, the firm, everything's riding on this. I know, Eleanor said calmly, the edges of her voice no longer soft. That's why I pulled out. You can't just do this. I can. And I did. Please, his voice dropped to a whimper. Please, Mom, you've always helped me. That was before I became a photo prop with a pulse, she said, her throat tightening just once, before she forced herself steady again. Before you decided I was nothing more than a good backstory to milk. The silence stretched. Then, quietly, she said, you have 30 days, Julian. I suggest you start packing. She hung up, and turned off her phone. The next morning, she woke to silence. No notifications, no buzzing, no screen lighting up like a Christmas tree. For the first time in years, she sipped her morning coffee and didn't feel that twist in her stomach. That crawling unease that had followed her like a shadow for a decade. Instead, she felt lighter. Not joyful, but untethered, alive. She walked to her hallway mirror, looked herself in the eye, and didn't flinch. She wasn't waiting for anyone's approval anymore. That afternoon, Eleanor called a real estate agent. The triple-decker in Dorchester was too big. Too full of ghosts and obligations and Sunday dinners that never happened. It had been her anchor. And now, she was ready to let it go. Fast sale, she told the agent. Cash offers only. No repairs. No games. Within a week, a developer made a generous offer. They wanted the land. She signed the papers with hands that no longer shook. With the sale complete, Eleanor took her time searching, not for another obligation, but for freedom. A month later, she bought a small yellow cottage along the coast of Maine. It sat on a rise above a rocky bay, with wild hydrangeas tumbling down the hill and a fireplace that smelled of cedar when it rained. While the cottage was being prepared, the siege began. Julian and Celeste showed up on her doorstep one rainy night. They pounded the door, pounded like children locked out. "Mom, open the door," Julian shouted, voice hoarse. Eleanor watched from behind the lace curtain. His hair was unkempt. Celeste's mascara had run in black streaks down her cheeks. "You can't do this," Celeste screamed. "You'll ruin everything." Their perfect world was already crumbling. They just hadn't accepted it yet. Eleanor didn't open the door. She picked up the phone instead. "Yes," she told the police. "I'd like to report 2 trespassers." "Do you know them?" the dispatcher asked. Eleanor looked out at the faces she once loved more than anything in the world. "No," she said, "I don't." The officers arrived quietly. Julian shouted. Celeste shrieked. The neighbors watched from porches and windows. Eleanor didn't say a word as her son was escorted down her front steps. After the patrol car drove away, she closed the door. Then she collapsed in the hallway, her body curling into itself like it was trying to disappear. In her hands, she clutched an old photo, Julian, age 6, covered in chocolate frosting, smiling like the world had never hurt him. She cried until her throat burned. But she didn't call him back. The next blow came in the form of a lawsuit. Harold called with the news. "They're accusing you of malicious interference," he said, disgust dripping from every word. "Claiming you made an indefinite verbal promise of support. That you destroyed their future." "They don't have money for lawyers," Eleanor said quietly. "They're bluffing." "They are," Harold agreed. "But they're flailing." Celeste took it further. She launched a smear campaign on social media, long, staged videos with trembling voices and fake tears. She painted Eleanor as a bitter, senile mother-in-law driven by jealousy. "She's destroying our marriage," she sobbed into the camera. "She hates my success. She's mentally unstable." Eleanor watched exactly 30 seconds of one video before forwarding it to Harold. "Defamation, if we need it," she wrote in her email. Then she logged off and went back to packing. By the time the 30-day notice expired, she was already settled in Maine. The foreclosure went through. Quiet, brutal. Harold called her early that morning. "It's done. The bank owns the penthouse now. They were escorted out by the sheriff this morning." Eleanor paused, her hand resting on a box of books. "Where will they go?" she asked, before she could stop herself. "Temporary motel. Revere. Julian's filed for bankruptcy. The firm is dissolving. His car's been repossessed." She sat down, eyes drifting toward the window. The Atlantic churned outside, gray and vast. She had always imagined revenge would taste like victory. But this felt more like ash. "You saved your life," Harold said gently. "They would have drained you dry." "No," she said. "I saved my dignity. There's a difference." Months passed. She changed her number. She joined a book club in town. Started volunteering at the library, reading aloud to children with toothy grins and wiggly energy. The nightmares stopped. She stopped waking up to phantom phone rings. She could taste food again. She started smiling without having to remember to. Then, one afternoon in December, a rusted sedan pulled into her driveway. Snow was falling, dusting the world in white. Julian stepped out. Eleanor watched through the window. He looked thin. His face was gaunt, older somehow. He wore paint-stained jeans and a coat with threadbare elbows. He knocked once. She opened the door, but stood in the frame. No invitation followed. "Hi, Mom," he said. "Hello, Julian." He glanced behind her, at the warm room filled with firelight and books. "It's beautiful," he said softly. "It is." He shifted on his feet. I wanted to see you. Why? We're in a basement apartment in Quincy. I'm working construction now, framing houses. He showed his hands, calloused and rough. It's honest work, hard, cold. She nodded, eyes resting on the bruises of life now etched into him. Celeste left me, he said, voice cracking. A month after the foreclosure. Said she didn't marry a poor man. She's dating a hedge fund guy now. Eleanor felt a flicker of something. Not pity, not quite, but it didn't grow. Not this time. I'm sorry to hear that, Julian. But I'm not surprised. He met her eyes, and for the first time in years, he looked like the boy who used to draw her towers. I messed up. I know I did. I lost everything. No, she said gently. You lost things, but you lost me long before that. Can you forgive me? She looked at him, really looked. The arrogance was gone. The mask had crumbled. All that was left was a man trying to rebuild from rubble. Forgiveness is a process, she said. It's not a light switch. You didn't just betray my bank account, Julian. You betrayed the woman who built your world. Piece by piece, sacrifice by sacrifice. I'll pay you back, every penny. I don't want your money, she said. I want you to understand what you did. And why I couldn't let it go on. I do, he whispered. I really do. She shook her head. No, Julian, you're not here for redemption. You're here to check if the safety net is still there. He swallowed, ashamed. Can I come in? Just for a coffee? The cold wind blew between them. She thought of all the times she would have thrown the door wide open. Made a sandwich, cut him a check, kissed his forehead, but she wasn't that woman anymore. Not today, she said. You're not ready, and neither am I. He nodded, tears slipping quietly down his cheeks. Okay, he whispered. Okay, Mom. He turned to go. Julian, she called softly. He stopped. Work hard. Be the man I raised. Not the man you became. Earn your life. He nodded, his shoulders square now, not slumped. And for once, he didn't ask for anything. Thank you, he said, and this time, it sounded real. She watched the car disappear around the bend, then closed the door. She locked it. She poured herself a cup of tea. She sat by the fire, picked up her knitting, and let the peace settle like a warm blanket. This was her home, her life, and for the first time in decades, it was hers alone. She'd paid a high price for it, her son, her illusions, her years of denial. But she had bought something priceless in return. Dignity. She was no one's backup plan. No one's narrative. She was Eleanor Whitmore. And this was the beginning of